Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad you stopped by today because today we are doing another Halloween themed project. In fact, the rest of October is going to be all Halloween projects, so no worries, everything is going to be super spooky, scary, and just a whole lot of fun. Anyways, today's project, I thought it'd be really fun to do a vampire themed project, so today we are going to be doing a vampire dragon. I realized I haven't done a dragon piece in a very long time, so why not do a Halloween dragon and make it a vampire? I thought those would look really cool together. Anyways, let's get started. Okay guys, the first thing that I am going to work on is going to be the clay pieces. I felt like doing these first just because I was a little impatient and I really wanted to get them done. So I'm going to do the feet first and then we're going to move on to the face. So for the feet, I made a very simple little wire frame for this. This is going to be basically what we're going to build our clay on, and I used a 14 gauge galvanized steel wire for this. I got it at the hardware store, and then the little wires that are connecting everything together is just a 20 gauge wire that I got at the craft store. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to cover up that area where all the wires are connected. So I'm just going to take a little bit of clay and I'm going to cover that up, make sure to smooth it all out and everything, and then I'm going to work on the claws. For the claws, I'm just going to roll out a little bit of clay into a cone shape. I'm going to put it at the end of each wire for each toe, and then I'm going to use my fingers to shape it into the shape of the claw that I would like. Now I'm going to bake this at 275 Fahrenheit for probably about 20 minutes, that way I can save my progress and then we can move on to making the bottom parts of the toes. Okay, our claws are done baking and now we can start on the bottom of the toes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some strips of clay, I'm going to lay them out onto the bottoms of the wire, and I'm going to use some tools and stuff to make some joints and different things like that, add some wrinkles and some texture to it. Basically, I don't want it to be a nice smooth surface, I want it to look like these actually bend, so if you kind of look at your fingers, you notice you have little wrinkles where you bend your fingers, so I'm trying to do that with this. So I'm going to do this to all of the toes, and once I'm done with the toes, I'm going to start going up the leg to make the rest of the foot. Once I have everything covered and I've added all the texture that I want, I'm going to put this in the oven again at 275 Fahrenheit for probably about 30 minutes this time. We're going to let that bake, and then once it's out of the oven and is cooled, we can start on the tops of the feet. For the tops of the feet, I want it to look a lot more scale-like, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some balls of clay and I'm going to layer them going down the foot and down the toes. I'm then going to use my tools to kind of separate these into more scales and just to add a little bit more texture to it and just mess around until I like the shape of the scales. Basically, I'm trying to make the scales look a little different, that way they don't look like all the other dragon feet that I make. So for these feet, I wanted to add a little bit of a spike detail to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of clay and I'm going to roll them out into cones and I'm going to place them where I want them. I think I want the spikes to be right where the foot transitions into the toes. After those are placed, I'm going to continue with my little scales down the toes, and then I'm going to keep adding some detail and separating things. Once I'm happy with everything and everything is completely covered and detailed, I'm going to put this in the oven at 275 Fahrenheit for probably about 45 minutes to make sure everything has a good bake. Now we can move on to making the face for our dragon. So for the head of our dragon, I'm going to use some tinfoil to make the base of the head, and I'm going to completely cover this in a nice thick layer of clay, smooth it out, and then we can start adding details. Now for this face, I really want to have its mouth open because I want to have all the teeth showing. Since we are going to be doing a vampire type style, the teeth are kind of a more important detail than anything else. Plus I want to make it look a little bit like a bat, so I'm going to try and make the face look a little bit more bat-like as well. It's not going to look super dragon-like. Now the main teeth are going to be quite large, so I pre-made these on some little wire frames, that way they had some better support. They're already baked and I'm just going to push them into the face and make sure to add some clay around them to make them look like they're part of the face and not just resting on top of the face. Some of the smaller teeth are also pre-baked. I just rolled out some little clay cones and I baked those ahead of time, and now we're just going to be pushing them into the mouth where we want them and sculpting around them. So once I have all my teeth into place, I want to give a lip to this. Now I do want some of the gums to be showing, so I'm going to make sure that my lip does not overlap my teeth. So I'm just going to take a long strip of clay and I'm going to run it around the mouth, make sure that I like the position of it, and then I'm going to blend it into the face. Now I'm going to add the nose to the face. Now this I want to look a lot like a bat nose, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll out some balls of clay. I'm going to layer it to create kind of a wrinkling effect. I'll use my tools to refine this a bit more later, but the very end is going to be a larger ball of clay that's smushed down, and then I'm going to use my tools to make the nostrils and shape everything. Now we can add the eyes. Now I'm going to take 2 small balls of clay. I don't want them to be very large. I want them to look a little bit beady-eyed. So I'm going to use kind of smaller eyes than I normally do. And I'm going to just push those into the clay face where I want them. Once I have them placed, I'm going to use some strips of clay to make the eyelids and blend those into the face. Now before I add any more detail, I'm going to clean up the edge around the neck. This is where we're going to connect it later to the body, and I'm just going to remove a bunch of extra clay that I don't need anymore. Now one detail I wanted to add to this to make it a little bit more spooky was I figured it'd look cool to give it kind of a blind eye. So I'm going to add a scar to the face going across one of the eyes, and then when we paint it, I'll have it kind of a milky white color, and then the other one can be like red or something. I just thought this would be a cool way to make it look a little bit scarier. Lastly, I'm going to go over the whole face with my tools and make a fur texture on it, and then once I'm happy with everything, I'm going to put this in the oven at 275 Fahrenheit for probably about 45 minutes. Now while our clay pieces are baking, I'm going to start on the sewing for the body. I figured we can get this done while we have about 45 minutes to kill. So I'm going to show you guys the pattern for this. It's pretty simple. It might just look a little confusing for you. So the first piece of our pattern is basically the top and bottom of the neck and chest piece. This is also where the wings are going to connect onto the side of this. And then we have the pattern for our legs, and these are going to be off to the side like this. And then this is going to be the pattern for the tail. So the pieces of fabric you're going to need is you're going to need 2 of the neck and chest pieces, one for the top and one for the bottom. They're exactly the same. And then you're going to need the outer leg pieces and then the inner leg pieces. And then 2 pieces for the tail, a left and a right. These are also going to be exactly the same. So the first bit of sewing that you're going to do is you're going to take the piece that's going to be the back of the dragon and you're going to connect the outer legs to this. So you're going to sew them right here. Then we're going to take the 2 pieces for the tail and we're going to connect these together as well. We're going to connect them to the end of each leg piece. After that, we need to sew the tail together, so what we're going to do is I'm actually going to add some spiky detail to this. So I'm going to be using some fake leather and some felt to create kind of like a feathering kind of spiky look down the back of the tail, and I'm going to be sewing these in between the 2 layers of the tail. So I'm going to take my felt and my fake leather and I'm going to sandwich them between the 2 layers of fur fabric, and I'm going to sew these all together. After you're done connecting everything together for the tail, this is what you'll probably have. I'm really happy with this, and now I'm going to move on to making the legs. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our inside parts of our legs and we're going to connect them to the outer side of them. So we're only going to be sewing down the very front of the legs. I'm going to leave a little bit of an opening at the very bottom of the leg, and this is where our clay feet are going to connect later. And the reason we're leaving the back open is so we can add everything to the wire frame. Okay, that's all the sewing that we can do before we add everything to the wire frame. Now we're going to move on to making the wings of the dragon. Okay, so this is the pattern that I've drawn out for the wings. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this whole piece to make the leather part of the wings. We're going to use the same fake leather that we used on the tail, and then I'm going to cut this portion off of the top, and I'm going to use this to make the little bit of fur fabric that goes on the very top of the wing. So these are the pieces that you're going to need for the wings. I'm going to need a left and a right for the fake leather, and then I'm going to need a left and a right for the top of the wing for each wing. And see, these are basically going to go on top like this. Now before we add the fur fabric to the top of the wing, I want to add a little bit more detail. I want to add the little finger pieces to the wings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold over my fake leather into the spots where I want those fingers to go, and I'm going to use my sewing machine to kind of sew along that to create a little bit of a fold. I'm also going to be giving it enough room so that we can put a wire in this later, that way it has a bit more support. So I'm just going to use my sewing machine to create a few folds in my wings, and then afterwards I'm going to measure this and then I'm going to add some wires to it. And basically all I need to do to add the wire is just run it through the little pocket that's created when we make the fold in the fabric. Okay, we can finally add the fur fabric to the very top of the wing. So I'm actually going to be sewing this into place instead of using my E6000, mainly because it was going to just work a lot better, especially since we gave a bunch of wrinkles into it, adding the little like finger pieces. I figured it would just be easier to sew it instead of trying to glue around all of that. So I'm going to sew along the bottom of the fur fabric, connecting it to the leather, and then after I get to the very end, I'm going to start sewing up the very top of the wing. This creates a nice pocket, that way we can add another wire frame to it later. Okay, and that's basically all the sewing that we're going to do now. We need to finish our clay pieces before we can put anything together, so now we're going to start on the painting. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to primer them, and since our main color is going to be black, I'm going to primer them with my black paint. So I'm going to just go over all of my clay pieces with black and make sure everything is covered up. Okay, our black primer is nice and dry, and we can start adding all the details to the face. I'm going to work on the face first, and then we can work on the feet. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to paint the inside part of the mouth a nice kind of skin color. I'm going for kind of a dark, kind of purpley blue color. With the skin colors, I'm going more dark because I want it to look a bit creepy, and I don't want to have any bright colors on it. So everything I'm going to kind of try to mute a little bit or make it look a little bit more dingy than normal. Another good example of this is I'm actually going to add a little bit of brown to the teeth to make them look like they're yellowed. So when I'm painting, I'm just adding a little bit of brown to my white, and I'm going over all of the teeth with this. You don't want to add yellow instead of brown because the yellow is just going to make them look like neon yellow. The brown kind of gives it more of a dingy quality. So for the details of the face, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding some highlights to kind of just change it up, because we don't want the face to just be a solid black. It's going to look too plain. Now the reason I'm using gray paint instead of white is because the white paint's just going to be too strong and it's going to overwhelm the black. So the gray is going to make it look a little bit more muted. Okay, now we can start on the eyes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to primer both of them the colors that I want. So the one that has the scar, I'm going to primer with a kind of dingy white color, and then the other one's going to be red. So I'm just going to go over this a few times until my color's nice and solid, and then we can start adding the details to the eyes. Now I came up with a little trick to make our pupils even. Basically, I took a straw and I dipped it in some paint, and I'm just going to push it into the middle of the eye. And by doing this, I can make them both the same size, and then I can just fill in the pupil with black or whatever color I want after that's dried. So for our red eye, I'm going to fill the pupil in with black, and for our gray eye, I'm going to fill it in with white. I'm also going to add a little bit of white highlight to the red eye, and then we can move on to painting more details like the scar and whatnot. So for the scar, all I'm going to do is I'm going to use a little bit of dark red paint, and I'm going to fill in that crack that we created. I'm probably going to touch up a few things around the eyes, but we're pretty much done with the face now. Now we're going to move on to painting the rest of the feet. So with the feet, I don't want to add a whole lot of detail to them. I want the face to have most of that detail, but I do want to have a little bit of the brown that we have in the wings and the tail in the feet. So I'm going to paint the top scales of the feet a nice brown color. So I'm just going to go over all those scales with a nice dark brown, and then once that's dried, I'm going to add some highlights to it, just a few more details, and then we're pretty much done with the feet. They're really simple. So after all of our paint has dried, I'm going to go over all of our clay pieces with a nice layer of resin. That's going to have to sit overnight to dry, and then we can start putting everything together. So the first thing we need to do is we need to start putting everything together for the wire frame. So for the wire frame, I have a very long strip of wire that is basically the measurement from the head all the way to the end of the tail. Now we need to add the wires for the legs. So I have these measured out, and I'm just going to use a thinner wire to wrap these together and combine them to the wire frame for the spine. After we have that in place, we can add our clay feet to the end of each wire. So I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to take a thinner wire and we're going to wrap everything together. Now we're going to start adding the fabric to this. So I'm going to start gluing the fabric for the legs all the way around the base of the feet. So I'm going to use a combination of E6000 glue and some hot glue to hold it into place. After we have everything glued, we're going to let that dry for a little bit, and then we're going to sew down the back of the leg and stuff our legs. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take the chest for the dragon, and I'm going to sew down the sides, connecting that together and going between the two legs. So I'm going to go down one side and then the other. After that's in place, we're going to sew down the bottom of the tail. So basically we're going to close up the tail. As we're doing this, we're going to stuff it as well. After you're done with the tail, we can now move on to adding the wings to the piece. So what we're going to do, just like the legs, we need to add a wire for this. So we're going to take a thinner wire and we're going to wrap everything together and hold it into place. Once you have the wires for the wings added to the frame, now we can add the wings to the wires. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our E6000 and a little bit of hot glue and we're going to put it down on some of the fabric where it's going to connect to the wing. We're then going to take one of the wings and we're going to run it over the wire for it, and then we're going to push it into the glue and hold it into place until the glue dries. We're going to let everything dry for a little bit, and then we're going to take that chest piece and the part that's going to go onto the bottom of the wing, we're going to glue that into place as well. We're going to let that dry, and then we can stuff the chest of the dragon and sew up the neck of the dragon. Now we're almost done, we just need to add the head to the piece and a few more details. So I'm going to glue my head onto the end of the wire for the neck. We're going to let that dry a little bit, and then we're going to glue the fabric for the neck all the way around the base of the head. Lastly, we're going to add some details, so I'm going to add some felt and fake leather details to the neck, and then we're going to add some ears to the face. The ears are really simple to make. All I did was I cut out a little bit of fur fabric and some felt, I sewed them together, and this time around I actually stuffed them. Most of the time I don't stuff my ears, but I wanted them to be a little bit fluffier. So I stuffed my ears and then I glued them into place, and I covered up the seams with a little bit more fur fabric. You're going to want to give your dragon some time to dry, and then afterwards you are all finished. Okay guys, and that's how I did a vampire themed dragon. I had so much fun, he came out super creepy, and I'm gonna have him along with a bunch of other creatures in my Etsy shop, so make sure to check the links down below for that if you want to buy anything. Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching, make sure to like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!